all I've done is play through how many people would have held the box with the gun in it before it got to me. It could have been so, well, it could have been fatal. I didn't let my children open a single parcel at Christmas. He knew what I looked like. I didn't know what he looked like. I didn't know who I had to be scared of.
So it's frightening. He never came in front of you. He never came to your house.
I don't know. It's like literally Fort Knox now. It's like we live in Alcatraz now.
So Myleene, thank you so much for joining us. So Peter Windsor was found guilty yesterday. What did that feel like to you when you heard that verdict?
There's a huge amount of relief hearing that we got the verdict that we would have liked. But again, I think there's just so much uncertainty. When I heard it was a unanimous verdict amongst the jurors, again, that was just pure elation, because I felt during the actual trial itself, as a woman, when you see 10 men and 2 women on the stand, and you're trying to explain what the experiences of a stalker case feel like as a woman, you don't know which way it's going to go. So a huge sense of relief, huge elation, really.
It's been so hard for you, because when you went to court and spoke about what had happened to you, I mean, it was clearly hugely emotional for you.
I think because this has been ongoing for some time now, my stalker's been in prison for the past year, awaiting this trial. Prior to that, it had been 4 years of sending letters, unwanted presents, and all sorts of things going on behind the scenes that I hadn't really known about until, I suppose, the last 8 months. So when you look at the combination of what that timescale looks like, and then suddenly it's an escalation of how much information you're getting, it's a lot on the family to deal with.
This is that your employer chose not to tell you initially about
Yes.
these letters to protect you, and then
Yes.
suddenly you found out. I mean, what is that like when you're taken aside and told you need to know that we have had a huge number of these items coming through the post for you and your colleague at Classic FM, Katie Bradley?
I think it's very challenging when your the autonomy is taken from you, your sense of whether you're allowed to make decisions for yourself. I find that a challenge initially, because I didn't know that my family or myself were in any kind of danger, and suddenly it felt like almost a snowball effect from the moment that I was informed that items had been coming thick and fast, and then I looked at what the items were. I only wish, actually, this is frustrating as well. I only wish that I could tell you the extent of the items that I received. I think some of the items have been deemed so disturbing for public consumption that the judge made a decision that they can never be mentioned, or there can never be images shown. But they were that disturbing.
But you saw those things.
I very much saw the items in question. All I can say is that they were of a sexually violent nature.
That's horrific.
It's horrific. It really is. I think, to begin with, and this is what we do as women, and that's the worrying thing, we minimise our experience in every single factor of our lives, from healthcare through to work, through to childcare, children, families. We try not to make too much of a disturbance, because it always backfires on us. And so when it came to this situation, I saw some of the items, and I suppose I did understand to a degree why nobody necessarily wanted to bother me, because in isolation, a lot of these items, I suppose you could actually make excuses for. And as I say those words already, no, that's not okay. When you think that 4 items per day for 4 years, you do the maths, it's excessive. And yet I found myself trying to think, I found myself initially thinking, is this as bad as I think it is? Trying to almost reason with myself.
Well, one day you were telephoned and told you had been sent an air gun.
Initially, the reason the email came through from my place of work was because some sexually violent items came through that were deemed quite hazardous. And the call then came through. The call came from my manager to report this to the police. Whilst the police were investigating, then it took an extremely serious turn, I got a phone call through saying that a gun had been previously intercepted. Now, they were looking into what the gun might mean, and they had to go and collect it, because this is the West Midlands police who had to travel down to collect it from the police at the Met here. So until they could get the details, they didn't really necessarily know what they were dealing with until they had the gun in their hands, as it were.
What did you take it to mean, Myleene?
A gun is a gun for me. The semantics of what is a gun came up quite a lot, as did the nature of what handcuffs are, as did the nature of what a uniform or a costume might be. And I've really found the semantics in court quite an interesting proposition that women have to go through on the stand. Because rather than actually saying, when I say to you, I received a gun, we then had to, as part of the defence, query what a gun might mean. What kind of gun? Was it a gun? Were they handcuffs? Were they plastic handcuffs? Were they offensive? How offensive? Was it a costume? Was it a uniform? You find yourself almost tying yourself in knots, which is understandable. You know, there's a man's liberty on the line, but there's also our sanity on the line too, and our own liberty. It becomes an emancipation of your own mind.
It's interesting hearing you talk like that, because one sort of is your thoughts are cast back to rape and sexual assault cases when the victim
Yes.
is trying to give evidence, and they're the sort of questions, I mean, obviously that's a completely different scenario, but they're the sort of questions that come towards the woman, getting her to try and doubt.
Yes.
This is what people say.
Yes.
Doubt what she's gone through. And that seems to have happened to you.
The extent with which reporters could cover items has been a really frustrating point for me, because any woman receiving any of these items, there's no question, none whatsoever. And I think any man, actually, and I did put this to the jury, there is no question whether it is a gun or whether it's any of the other items that the judge felt was just too violent for people to see and too disturbing. There's no doubt about it that if anybody received any of these items, they would be called into question. When the police finally did go to my stalker's house, they found a map as to how to get to me. They found gloves, binoculars. Everything is questionable. And I did try, I suppose, for my own peace of mind, try and put these items into isolation, because it doesn't feel as heavy. But it is actually the combination of these items that just paints a really clear picture as to what was going on.
He sent you all these notes. Did you read all the notes he sent them? They were very strange. The things he was referring to you as a priestess, a vixen, and, you know, creepy stuff. Again,
Some of the notes haven't been deemed appropriate for public consumption, but they were of a very violent nature. And some of the notes were of a religious nature, and some were just utterly bizarre and made no sense to me whatsoever. And again, sitting on the stand and having to read them aloud to the court and asking what you make of them, I still can't make any sense of them, as it were. But I think anyone who would be receiving even just one or two of those, you know, they would rightfully feel alarmed. But I think when I saw the barrage, the actual amount that had been sent, the police actually went to the post office to get a lot of their evidence, just to take the footage to see just how regularly my stalker was attending the post office. It's, I think, the volume that is equally as worrying as the actual contents.
Do you think it would have made a difference to you, Myleene, had you known from the beginning that this stuff was being sent to you? Obviously,
yes.
Your employers chose to wait a while.
It wouldn't have been my decision, and I made that very clear. I think that women, especially, and I can only speak as a woman, that's my own experience of the situation, I would have liked to have had an understanding of what was out there, as it were, and to be able to make that decision for myself. But we are where we are, and I'm just so glad, actually, that the West Midlands Police acted so diligently and so clearly and actually believed me and took every single part of this case as they treated it as seriously as it deserved to be. I understand why so many people are frightened to come forward, because you feel that you're playing the game with yourself. I've mentioned this before, but you you try and make sense of it, and you try and excuse certain behaviours because nothing essentially has happened to your person, then you wonder if, well, is it almost enough to report? And that's a terrible feeling, that you then put yourself into self-doubt. I think, weirdly, and I don't wish it upon any of my colleagues, but having fellow colleagues who had experienced this right up to the First Minister of Scotland, there was actually bizarrely safety in numbers. But I do think of those who experience this and don't have that unity, it must be even harder.
This was Nicola Sturgeon was sent a note in his blood.
Nicola Sturgeon was actually sent a note, a few notes actually. There was a kill list of people that the stalker had taken umbrage with. Freemasons were on there, politicians were on there, doctors were on there. There was a kill list. That is something that very much should have been taken seriously at the time, but it's because we're crossing borders that it didn't come to fruition.
You raise an interesting point, and something that came up during the trial, the nature of what stalking is.
Yes.
Because Peter Windsor's defence argued, well, he never left his room, he didn't go physically to a place of work, he just sent these letters. The suggestion being, well, is that stalking?
I was asked, in my own words, by the defence to explain what I felt stalking was, which I thought was quite surprising. I think I suppose, all have an idea of what a stalker's behaviour might look like, but we're using a law that was written in the 1800s. The police are duty-bound by a pamphlet that was written in 1984. Tech has now since entered the chat, quite literally. We have stalkers who never leave their rooms, and yet the bombardment of messages and online messages to their victims, it's prolific. If anything, it makes it more effective. That they can reach anybody, anytime, anywhere, because of the nature of tech.
Do you think that stalking then, generally speaking, is still something that is not taken as seriously as it should be?
I think because of the early nature of stalking. So if you feel that something in your gut isn't correct and you report it, it's almost like it has to come to some kind of fruition. It has to escalate to a point of no return before people do take it seriously, I've found. And that is where it goes very wrong, because then later down the line, we're now at a point where this case is having to decide, well, how did we get to a point where a man who has paranoid schizophrenia and has had it for 30 years, I don't know how much I can talk about his actual medication or anything along those lines, or his treatment, but how have we got to a point where this was unmanned, unregulated? He lived in a place where there were 5 other people and they saw nothing. He was at the post office 4 or 5 times a day and they saw nothing. There are so many people along the way that you could think, well, in an isolated case, would I say something or would I not? And it's about encouraging everyone to say, look, if it feels wrong, it's most likely going to be wrong. And there's nothing will have necessarily come to any kind of harm if you actually report it and it doesn't turn out to be what you think it is. But you could actually be the final piece of the puzzle, as my colleague was, by her turning around and saying, look, I've received these letters. Whilst hers didn't feel as violent as mine, although it's questionable, one of the letters my colleague received was actually a will writing kit, and another parcel she received was running spikes. But it started off as, I suppose, seemingly what you call harmless, just letters of adoration and champagne and perfume, which then very quickly escalated. And I think that's the rub. Where is the line? People don't necessarily know where that line is or when it's been crossed, but it's a feeling. And I think when you put all of those parts together, it's never as black and white, but it's evident there's something very, very wrong here.
You sound like you feel you've been let down along the way, along this very difficult journey.
I feel that without West Midlands Police and my colleague, actually, I wouldn't even be sitting here with you, and this stalker later down the line wouldn't be getting the help he so clearly needs. And I don't know to what end this would have got to. At the time, we had letters written in blood to the First Minister and will writing kits and guns and maps and binoculars and all of these untoward items. But it could have been it could have been fatal. As the police have pointed out, the fact that the gun wasn't opened is a literal lifesaver, because whilst it was an air pistol, at 6 foot, it's still fatal. And this is why the police took it so seriously. It was in a parcel. It could have, think of the hands that would have touched that parcel from the post office all the way through to my colleagues at work, through to the person delivering the parcel, the girls at reception who work at reception where I work. All I've done is play through how many people would have held the box with the gun in it before it got to me.
This is just terrifying, Myleene. This is something this must have had an impact on you that's never going to go away. And the word is terror.
I certainly felt terror. I think that when somebody like a police officer, in this case PC Dinescu, when he turned around and said, no, this could prove fatal, it felt like such a huge relief to have somebody, I suppose, recognise how you were feeling and be in agreement with that. Again, as women, we minimise so much, and we try to just shrink ourselves and almost not appear as hysterical women. You know, the way that so much of the language was used, that costumes were sent to me. Well, were they costumes? I don't know. What, you know, none of us have the evidence per se now, but you know, a police uniform in the wrong hands is not something to be taken lightly. My family, I had to take a really clear look at how I run my household and what my journeys would look like for both myself and my children getting to school. You know, this happened just before Christmas. People don't realise the impact. I didn't let my children open a single parcel at Christmas.
Because you were frightened of what was in them, obviously.
My children, you know, my daughters were old enough to understand, but my son, he wasn't allowed to open anything.
How did you explain that to them?
There was no explaining it. It was very tricky, you know, to tell a little boy that at Christmas he can't open parcels that were being delivered to the door, because after a conversation with the police, we all agreed that we had to be extremely careful. And so I don't, you know, in as much as courage is catching, so is fear. And I certainly didn't want my family to feel the repercussions of that fear. And it's something I had to really, you know, lock down. But you're always looking over your shoulder. You have to remember, I didn't know what my stalker looked like. So until his photo was released yesterday, I had no idea, because my evidence was given behind a screen. He knew what I looked like. I didn't know what he looked like. I didn't know who I had to be scared of.
So it's frightening. He never came in front of you. He never came to your house.
I don't know.
But you don't know that.
No, I don't know. I don't know if he came to my work. He said he'd never been to London. There were maps of how to get to my work found in his house. There were really, really disturbing letters written to me. Like I said, some have been released, but some can't be released because they're just so shocking. And some of the items, I mean, you have to also imagine if a gun was allowed, if the details of a gun were allowed to be released, but there's certain other items that aren't allowed to be released, you can only imagine just how shocking they are.
How has this changed how you are at home now?
I'm a mum. I have to try and make sure that I carry on leading my family and make them feel as safe as I possibly can. I've had to give them information that is age appropriate for each member, and also my extended family and my friends as well. You know, the far-reaching ripples of fear, they go a long way, right through to what's going on, you know, in my place of work as well. I think it's just made everyone take a really close look at how things are managed at the moment.
Do you think that your place of work will change its own policies
Yes.
at global and now just tell people when they get this stuff as soon as they can?
I think that, you know, if you imagine, you know, these are huge corporations that are receiving a huge, you know, they've got post rooms. There's a vast amount of post that's coming and going. But if it's a case of every single thing has to be logged now, well then that's just how it's going to have to roll. If it keeps people safe, and it's not just the person that it's, you know, at the end of the line receiving it, but it's all the other people along the way that also handle those parcels, right through to the post room, right through to the Royal Mail who intercepted the gun in the first place.
Has it made you think twice about even working and doing a sort of public role?
My role is a public role. I've been in the public eye for 20 odd years now, and I'm really proud of the work that I do. And I think as an advocate and a campaigner and someone who speaks up for women's rights, I take that role really seriously. It's just a stark reminder, though. It's a really stark reminder that what we go through as women on a daily basis, you know, it can be pretty terrifying. And as much as I wish to say, you know, we believe you, we hear you, please, if this is happening to you, come forward. I know how difficult it is because I've been there. I've literally sat in that seat, and it's not an easy thing to ask of people. But I hope that in so doing, that it will bring other people forward.
But did you think, as a public figure, did you think twice? I mean, in a sense, Myleene, you're well known. Did you think twice, really, about even bringing this forward and going to the police? Because, you know, some people might fear it might exacerbate the whole situation.
There was most definitely fears that if I say anything, this is going to exacerbate what's currently going on in my life. And I had to really think very carefully about it. But, look, I work in entertainment, and if this is what I'm on the receiving end of, who knows what other people are experiencing. So it didn't feel like it was something I could turn my back on, that's for sure. But it did take a lot of thought, and I don't think I was genuinely prepared or understood just what that process would look like, what it would feel like. It's extremely vulnerable. You feel very vulnerable, and I think when everything's presented to you, they give you a catalogue of items when you sit in the box, as it were. So the jury have the same book, and it's just utterly gory. And when it's all compiled and you all look through it together as the court, you know, somebody said to me before I walked in, "Don't worry, it won't be like the movies." And I came out and I said, "It's exactly like the movies."
Can you sleep okay?
I think I can sleep okay now. At the time, you're worrying all the time about. It's at the back of your mind. It's always at the back of your mind as to, will the verdict be the one that you want, that he deserves, and also there's that conflict. There's that conflict of this is clearly a very, very sick, very disturbed man. He's going to need a lot of help. Will he get that help? The questions were right to be raised. How has this man, with letters going to the First Minister, with letters, you know, at the volume that they were arriving at, and the items that he was sending, which also takes a lot of finance to be able to put together, and planning. How has he managed to do this? How has he managed to go unnoticed for so long?
Do you think then that had you known earlier, you would have gone to the police earlier, and this might have all escalated earlier? It might have come to a conclusion earlier?
None of this is ideal.
No. Had
I gone earlier, would the gun have been sent? Would the other sexually violent items have been sent? I don't know. So I really don't know if finding him earlier or later was best for the case. But I do think that, well, look, he'd had warnings previously and they didn't come to anything. So sadly, the whole thing is just a really sorry situation. But it's most certainly made me second guess myself and think about my own safety, and I've re-looked at that entire situation. I've reassessed all of it.
Because you've actually really been through it, Myleene, because you've twice had intruders at your property.
Yes.
When you've been there,
yes.
And you've already upped your security as
Yes.
a consequence.
Yes, it's like literally Fort Knox now. It's like we live in Alcatraz now. Yes, I have to be careful. I don't want to become my own prisoner. I certainly don't want that for my family. But as I explained in court, a woman, before she even leaves the house or before she returns home, our experience of what it's like to look after ourselves and keep ourselves safe, we are forever risk assessing. We know who's walking behind us. We have our keys ready coming out of our bag. We message our girlfriends, "Did you get home?" We are relentless in our in our pursuit of making sure that our loved ones are safe, whereas I do believe most men on the whole can just leave the house and walk back in.
The number of reported cases of stalking have significantly risen over the past decade. Those lines you just said, I mean, what do you think that says about 2025 and being a woman? It's 2025 and the things you're talking about would not have been unknown to women 20 years ago.
Yes, well, I think fear is prevalent at the moment, and I think there's a real appetite for division of how to keep people feeling like less of a community, because when you're a community, when you're structured, you feel stronger. And I think that so many people, you know, they don't have a community to rely on or lean on. There's a lot of people in isolation who are very sick, who are in these unfortunate positions where they can send out guns and letters written in blood and all sorts of other paraphernalia. And I think that there certainly is a case of where people would love to be able to blame. They would love that. I don't want to sit here and blame anybody. You know, you could look at the timeline, which is 4.5 years now. You could look at this timeline and say, well, this went wrong, and this person should have reported that, and this person here should have realised this was an alarm bell, and the police in Scotland should have told the police, the Met, who should have in turn told West Midlands. There's so many avenues that this could have gone so wrong. And actually, I'm really grateful for the people that made it actually come to fruition and have seen justice done, because it will give so much courage to those that need it right now. You know, I can be a part of actually turning the dial on what's going on right now too, because that fear that people are really sort of relishing and scaremongering and creating division with, there's been a lot of good done over this week. A lot of people did come together, a lot of people did use their voices and their authority to be able to, I suppose, extract good here, exact good.
And it sounds like you're going to continue to tell your story if you need to, in order to encourage other people to come forward, because it's difficult to go through a court case, as you yourself has experienced. The doubt that is expressed in that courtroom, you as someone that people know, the curiosity that is directed towards you. I mean, as you say, most victims of stalking are not celebrities like yourself. It's hard to get the courage to come forward. I mean, the West Midlands Police applauded your bravery in doing this, which I think says a lot. That word bravery, that's what it takes in your pursuit of justice, to try and get justice.
It's not an easy thing to do, to take the stand and tell your story and hope that you'll be believed, because you leave yourself extremely vulnerable. It's almost like giving someone the power to know how to destroy you. You know, everything that they wish to get to you, it's almost like the affirmation that they managed it. But as I said to the jury, as I said to the court, there's nobody, man, woman, that would receive that box, open that box, and not feel terror.
What would you like to see happen to Windsor? The sentencing is next month.
I hope he gets the help he needs. He clearly is a very, very sick man. There is no doubt about that. The more that everything has unfolded, I think it's very easy for people just to dismiss the situation that this man was in, and to, you know, you hear all the usual plaudits as well. And ultimately, at the heart of this is somebody that they absolutely shouldn't be out, you know, in the community. They shouldn't be around the public. He's extremely, extremely ill, and I think everybody recognises that.
So he shouldn't be at liberty again.
The judge himself said you will either face a prison sentence or a hospital one. There's no option here for any kind of emancipation.
I think you'll have a bit of a different Christmas this year, won't you? Your kids will open the boxes God.
And. It's things like that I think when people ask what have the effects been like for you, for your family, you know, I pride myself on being independent. You know, I relish being independent, and living my life to the full, and with my family as well. And when somebody you've never met, you know, tries to box you in, tries to contain that, second guess, you start second guessing yourself. You start changing your routes. You don't open parcels. I will not open a parcel or a letter, most certainly at work, not at all. you know, I'd rather it hadn't been mentioned, but I saw that it was mentioned in court. That again, kudos to the schools, who also then, with their duty of care, that they were made aware, and they were phenomenal. And this is what I think, for all the things that went very wrong, so much went right. And when people do come together and rise up, but honestly, they've been phenomenal, from the schools to the police to my colleague who was brave enough to speak up. We did it together. To those who are asking, how can we help, support and make changes here? Nobody's just sat and said, right, well, that's a shame, and locked it away and moved on. Actually, what they've done is they've elevated how security can be managed, how women's voices can be elevated and heard and amplified. And ultimately, I think actually, if this means another person who's sitting there who feels utterly shackled, who feels terrified by what their situation looks like right now, you know, I think this is a clear indicator how quickly things can escalate, how something might seem harmless, a few letters, some champagne, some perfume, it very quickly escalated to handcuffs, sexual violence and a gun.